tell more or less the resilience of the wood, how it's going to vibrate. Because each piece is distinct, even from the same piece of tube. A couple of pieces of cane that you get out of the little tube can be different, because the cane is different on one side of the plant than on the other, and maybe because of the exposure to the sun or some other factors. So even out of the same little tube of cane, if you get 2 or 3 pieces like this, they can be quite different between them. Often that's the case, not always. Sometimes it's pretty much the same, but not always. So you score it, you fold it over the knife, double it. Now it is a double reed, 2 sides that are going to vibrate against each other. And when the air passes through, eventually, now you put it on a shaper tip. Cut it here a little bit so it fits in between the ears of the shaper. Stick it onto the shaper. Now you look through at the light and line it up so the same amount of cane is on each side, so you get a correct duplication of the shape. When you skive down the sides of the shaper, and that gives you the form, you tighten it up, take the razor blade that you sharpened up, hold it here, and now you're going to duplicate the shape, but in cane. The cane will be shaped like the shaper is, like the metal tool is. It's called a shaper. And you do both sides. Carefully now, because if it's not done carefully, the reed won't seal. It will leak air on the sides, and it will be for nothing. So it has to follow the pattern really quite carefully. Okay, take that off. Now you have what is called a shaped piece of cane.
Okay.
It has its form that it will have on the reed eventually. Take it, put it on here, and you have to take a little wood off the edge. And this is so that when you bind it onto the cork in a nickel silver tube, it binds closely to the tube.
Oh, it's a Reed's masterclass.
I'm doing a reportage.
That's nice.
Documental.
That's great.
Now we have.
Now I'm going to copy the technique. And
now we fold it back. We line it up carefully, like that.
Masterclass.
Now we have to find a tube.
Now we give a kiss.
That'll help.
That may disturb the master.
Yes. Excuse me, master. Please.
Okay. Now we find an old tube from a reed that doesn't look like it works very much anymore.
Yeah. To reuse the tube.
I don't have time to go and try them now, so I'm just going to take one that looks worse. The reed looks worse, and just. Okay.
That's unused reeds, right?
These are used reeds.
Reused,
yeah.
okay.
Now, so I just cut the old reed off the tube, like this. There's the tube.
Yep.
These are called staples. A little brush and clean it a little bit inside. Put it on the mandrel. This is a mandrel. Push it to the end. Now you have it ready to bind onto the tube. Now you take the thread, coat it with a bit of wax, beeswax. Then you tie it to something stable. You could have a little hook, would be good, but
yeah.
I never wanted to put one into this desk, so I just do it like this. On the drawer, works fine. Now you're ready to tie the reed. You're tying the reed blank, because it's a reed that's not scraped yet. It'll be a reed blank. Take the thread, Once again, you have to look carefully at the alignment on the cane. You line it up more or less like it's going to be. Now, you place it on the tube. These are all things that you know from doing it years about the distances approximately and everything. You start about 3 turns from the end of the tube. You look at the tube through the side of the cane. Once again, you have to adjust how it's closing. Now when it looks more or less right and you're about 3 turns from the end of the tube, then you line it up like this. Check again the alignment. And another turn and backwards. And then you go winding towards the cork and nickel silver tube. Check it once again for the alignment. Still okay, because sometimes they shift and you have to loosen the thread and realign it. You go down to the end here, about 2 or 3 turns from the end to before the cork. Then you make half hitches like this. Slip it over, tighten. Usually 3 of them is perfect. 2 would be able to slip out, so 3 is. Then you cut it off. You just cut the thread. Now you have a reed blank. That's the blank.
Oh, sorry. Oh, got it.
What will hopefully become a reed that plays. And I really hope so, because I don't have much time for this today. Oh, now these ears, it has ears.
Yeah.
You have to take those off right from the start. So you take the knife, and it has to be done very exactly. Like right now, there's still too much ear there, so you go back. And the ear has to disappear and allow the shape, how the shape really is, just to be.
So
without
the shaper
any
should have
extra
done
wood
that,
there.
no?
Huh?
It doesn't. You don't cut that on the shaper itself.
No, that's a result of this on the shaper. You skive from here with the blade, so always it's going to leave these 2 little tabs, what we call ears. And so you want to get rid of those right from the beginning, because that affects the way the reed responds very much. Now once you have it looking pretty much visually like the shape is about right, you still take a fingernail file that the ladies use for their nails and just go over that ear a little bit more. Get the shape down to where it is a continuation of the real shaper.
Because it's not too intruding,
No, it's okay.
because if you
Now?
have to hurry.
Once that's done, looks good, no ears. Backlighting is important in making reeds. You have to look up to the light all the time, look through the reed.
You better not be short-sighted.
Now you check, if you're nearsighted, it helps.
But if
But
you're
if you're
short,
extremely nearsighted, it could be a problem. If you're farsighted, you have a bad time making reeds. But if you're nearsighted, myopic, like I am, usually you'll have very good vision close up.
Yeah.
And this is close-up work, so you need your close-up vision. Now you check. There's good suction. It means the sides of the reed are sealing well. That's very critical. If it doesn't seal well from the start, you cut it off and throw it out and try another one, because it won't get you anywhere to have a leaky reed. Now I put this on a millimeter ruler, and it's tied quite long, this one, at about 75. I mark it. This is just my method of doing it. Everyone does different things. I mark it at 68 millimeters. And I'm ready to... Now that's the easy part of making reeds. Before I did this, I had already passed the cane through a machine to scrape out the inside of the cane to a very special curve that's very critical. And then I shaped it.
What's the machine to?
It's a gouging machine. Yeah. It's like a planing machine, and it has a special little knife that cuts out the inside of the cane and makes a very special curve. And that's the easy part of reed making, what we've just done. Now the hard part begins. This is, anybody can learn to do this quite quickly, but how you scrape the reed and adjustment is a thing that you're learning about over the years. Now, I go a little bit before that mark that I made at 68 millimeters, and I'm going to put like a pre-scrape. We call the cut of the reed a scrape. So I'm scraping the reed and making sort of a preliminary outline of what the reed will look like eventually. And I start out by making like an inverted V shape, pretty much, just for starts. When we look at it here, it's like a V. Both sides should be fairly equal. Eventually they should be very equal, but at the start you can get by with a little bit of inequality there. So that's the outline of the tip basically. Now I'm going to just loosen up the back of the reed for the low vibrations. You have something like that with a spine down the middle. You leave the center has to have its a thicker part. So this is quick work. Then becomes the adjustment process and playing it, which is that part that is time-consuming and frustrating sometimes. So once I come back to the tip a little bit, once I get this fairly thin down, I'm ready to cut the reed open, and it will actually become a double reed at this point, because right now you see the opening. That opening is what we blow the air through. So you can see it's very small, so the air has to go through at very high pressure.
Let's see if we can see it a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, so we have basically a reed with a basic outline on it at this point. It's not a reed yet. It doesn't play. It's just starting to make a little bit of a peep from the pre-scraping, but now comes the hard part. You got to go back and sharpen up the knife. It's a little bit uncouth because I spit on my stone. Not everybody does that. But this is a special stone that a violin maker in Poland gave me about 40 years ago.
How many years?
Almost 40, maybe 35 years ago. 35 years. And it's the same stone I've been using for a long time because it does the job better than anything I found. So, and you have to take that residue off from the metal right away. The saliva helps float that. There are people that use oil on the stones, but that's really messy with reed making, and it tastes bad. Okay, so now you take this little tongue, which is out of blued steel.
Mm-hmm.
You stick it in between the two sides of the reed. Now it's a double reed, actually. And you start working. First, I work out at the tip of the reed. I'm going to start making that tip more into like an inverted U shape, approximately. So we go. All this time is important to know the angles of your knife, what does what, and that's what you learn from making hundreds of reeds over the years. Thousands. I don't know how many. You're making a basic shape still, but pretty soon that reed will start to, what we say, crow, the sound that it makes when you put it in your mouth a little too far and blow on it. You have to do the same thing on both sides always, so you're always turning the reed over and doing what you just did on the other side to the side that's facing you. So, scraping, scraping. Angles are important. I hold the knife up very much and scrape from a point out here to the outside corner. That way I'm leaving the thicker part of the cane in here, but I'm thinning out the outside arc of the tip. So the knife you have to keep sharpening all the time. It's already not sharp enough for this tip work.
Oh yeah.
Now you've got an outline, sort of like an inverted U shape. You've got a spine down the middle. The cane has been taken out here, the preliminary scrape, and here, going like this and going like this approximately. You have your spine. Now at this point it should start crowing. That's the crow. Very stiff. It would kill you to try to play a reed like this, but anyway. Keep it wet. The cane dries out. You have to sometimes maybe dip it in while you're sharpening the knife and let it soak a little more. It has to be constantly wet or it won't vibrate.
But
That's
it dries
We
afterwards.
have a bottle of water on the stage. And
Ah.
we wet the reeds during the concert, or we stick them in our mouths to keep them moist. But the cane has to be pliable, or it won't vibrate if it dries out. And especially with soft attacks or anything in the music, if the cane is a little dry, it's not, the tone is not going to start out right away, and you'll blow it. The passage won't come out. So, blow the water back out now. The cane is more pliable still. I go back now and work on this tip, redefine it more. It's way too thick still. I'm scraping out to the corners of where the ears were, right to the corner of the shape always. Integrating this hump, which is called the heart, into the tip area. Integrating it. I'm like pushing the cane off the end onto the plaque. This is the plaque. So it's a matter of having a very sharp knife always. You're pushing the cane little by little to the end and off onto the plaque. Now I do this a little on this side more, and then I'm going to go to the back of the reed and loosen up the length of the reed more, because that's what fills in the lower partials of the sound, the long scrape. This tip that I'm working on is what starts the vibration out. So if it is not right from the early on. Now the back is too thick on this reed, but I haven't really started working on it much. I just did the pre-scrape. Now I'm going to go to the back, and I'm going to re-scrape the back more or less like I did, staying away from the spine. I still want to keep it, and not making the outside rails too thin. I'm scraping out that way. Now it's starting to get more of the crow that it should have eventually. It will be a little different, but so that will loosen up the lower partials. The tip still needs work. That's where the high notes are.
So then how many reeds for every concert?
Oh. Now it will play on the oboe. It's still stiff and probably not a very great sound, but very thick.
Thick.
It should crow a C natural. It's crowing a little low, so I'm going to cut a little off the end, the razor blade, on the block.
Do you have?
There it is, almost at a C. Now I'm going to sharpen up again and go back and work on that tip